Bam, everybody. How the heck are we doing on Thursday, May 21 for a daily digital download? I hope y'all are doing well. I find myself in the throes of crypto winter where I'm trying to find reasons for hope. And last night, while I was thinking about doing these daily digital downloads, I had to ask myself, what would my OG friends, like the folks who were cypherpunks, what would they think about the type of stuff that I say and the content that I'm creating and just where we're at today in blockchain and crypto? And I wonder if I come across as a fraud or someone who is bootlicking the banks. And I really hope that that's not how I come across. I'm really just trying to point out what is happening in blockchain and crypto right now. And unfortunately, the biggest stories of the day are who's adopting this technology and for what. And it's TradFi, guys. It's banks. It's Wall Street. It's institutions across the world. And they're doing so because it's cheaper and faster to use blockchain, and there's privacy embedded into these solutions. So this is kind of an internal dialogue I'm having with myself, a qualm that I'm grappling with. How would my OG friends who made all their money on Bitcoin, me, I still have to work for a living. How does that shape how we look at blockchain and crypto? I don't think that we're going anywhere as an asset class, as an industry. You just go to every daily digital download I've written or go check out, nice plug, the Smart Economist newsletter. It's obvious that we're being adopted, our technology, if I'm anthropomorphizing it. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share that because sometimes I wonder where we're going as crypto natives. I got into blockchain and crypto because I loved being able to earn funds in a passive manner outside of stonks and T-bills and banks. And I'm pretty sure the rest of the world, the rest of the retail world, has a reason for the passion that they're involved in blockchain and crypto as well. So I just wanted to address that because sometimes it can be difficult to be so passionate about blockchain and crypto, and yet if you look at all the news stories, the news of 2026 is about hacks and it's about adoption. It's not about privacy solutions or new manners of connecting the world via blockchain, or really new manners of decentralization. And so if this is something that you've thought or that you've been grappling with yourself, you're not alone. We're here together. But let's get on to today's news, because we have some fun articles as well as some sad ones. The first one, let's just start off with something bullish. SpaceX holds a ton of Bitcoin. They hold 18,712 Bitcoins worth approximately $1.45 billion, which is pretty cool because SpaceX has been a long-term hodler now. They began acquiring their Bitcoin in 2021, which is around the same time that Tesla made its $1.5 billion purchase. And for the most part, SpaceX has held that Bitcoin. Also super cool is they had a cost basis of around $35,000 per coin, which is easily 2x their initial investment right now. Congrats to SpaceX. Even though they've been selling a little bit, I don't think that matters. They still hold a ton of Bitcoin. And despite all his trolling and support for Dogecoin, Elon has sufficiently allocated into King Bitcoin. Moving on to speak of the devil. This is exactly the type of news I was talking about earlier, where the news of the day is politics and TradFi and mainstream adoption from these banking-like entities. Well, the Federal Reserve is seeking public input on offering master accounts to blockchain and crypto companies. What's a master account? It's more or less a way to access banking rails that are connected with the Fed. And the Fed wants to offer crypto companies, crypto firms, a new type of payment account. And they've also received a lot of requests to access Federal Reserve payment solutions and services from institutions that aren't FDIC or federally insured. The Fed said in a statement, quote, "The proposed payment account would be tailored to support innovation by serving the clearing and settlement needs of certain eligible institutions while also mitigating material risks to the reserve banks and the payment system." These crypto firms would be able to essentially connect directly. Oh, I got a little drop here. Hold on. Excuse me. Would allow crypto firms to be able to connect to core payment rails like FedWire or ACH without relying on intermediary banks. And this is the beauty of blockchain and crypto, especially as TradFi views us, is this technology disintermediates. It removes third parties from processes, ergo, making life cheaper, faster, and more efficient for banks. And so this is just another example where we want to empower the two parties that are transacting amongst one another and remove third parties that don't necessarily need to be there. Honestly, this is largely the reason. Well, this was what I was espousing to my family in the early days when I got into Bitcoin as to why it was such a significant technological advance. Because if you migrated to the US, and we'll use LATAM because I grew up in Miami and I just understand these experiences a little bit better. If you migrate from Central or South America and work and live in the US, you probably don't have a high school degree, definitely not a college diploma, and you're not really making tons and tons of money every month, but you're making better money than you would have had you stayed in the country where you emigrated from. And more often than not, these folks who migrate here are sending money back to their family. And again, if you're moving here without education, without resources, you're probably not getting the highest paying job. So whatever you're able to send back after surviving here in the States, which is extremely expensive, paying for rent, paying for food, just paying to live, whatever money you do have to send back is probably, and I'll just go on out on a limb and say, it's probably a couple $100s every month. The fees to use Western Union, which is the remittance service here in the US, can be up to $25 per transaction. If you're sending home $100, let's just say that, to your family who needs it, you're losing 25% of the money that you sent internationally because of Western Union, a third party. When we disintermediate, when we get rid of third parties, we get rid of fee and gatekeepers like Western Union. And this is just an example that I've been using over the past few years. Western Union, of course, is integrating support for blockchain and using blockchain rails. But that was the example that I've been using for the past few years. And now we're seeing the Federal Reserve asking crypto firms to provide public comment on a way for them to access master accounts so they can use these rails themselves and don't have to depend on a third party for sending money between different countries. Very interesting stuff. Man, this next piece of news really, really brought me back to one of my largest losses in the blockchain and crypto space. I don't know how many of you were here during the Terra Luna collapse, but I got wrecked. A lot of my friends got wrecked. I'm talking wrecked. And I'm an idiot. I take full responsibility for my role in this story that I'm about to share. And I had a lot of friends who were also doing something similar, but using funds for different reasons. Anchor was a yield platform that gave you 20% yield on your UST that was put onto the platform. UST was an algorithmic stablecoin that maintained its peg to $1 based on the creation and the burn of Luna tokens. And it's so obvious in hindsight, but where was that yield coming from? Why were we getting 20% yield on what we put into Anchor? I thought back then I was smarter than everyone and that I knew the answers, and that the 20% yield was coming from the burning and minting of Luna, and portions of that revenue was being directed into UST or into Anchor for UST yield. And I also very distinctly remember thinking that Terraform Labs had a pretty good grasp on how to maintain the function of UST and Anchor. They had an emergency fund, basically, that would be able to continue funding this 20% yield. It's funny because it's this exact emergency fund that was used to buy Bitcoin that really started the fall of everything. When Do Kwon purchased Bitcoin with Terraform Labs funds, and he bought in size too, that was the beginning of the end, because Terraform Labs had a large allocation of Bitcoin, which was being used as collateral to support the peg for UST. And when you have a highly correlated asset as collateral for another, let's just call it innovative stablecoin, if things go wrong, they can go wrong rapidly. And boy, oh boy, did they. So one can say that the collapse of Terra Luna was the beginning of the end or the beginning of the bear market for 2022, 2023, and can actually be tied to the collapse of FTX. FTX, of course, was in cahoots with Jane Street, which was the trading firm that had severely close relations with FTX founders. And there were a lot of interrelations between Jane Street and Terraform. So one of the Terraform Labs admins, Todd Snyder, alleged on Monday that Jane Street traders used private chats to obtain insider information from Terraform employees before dumping the firm's entire $192 million Terra USD position hours before the stablecoin's collapse. The filing alleged that Jane Street traders created a secret message chain that involved current and former employees of Terraform, and that chain was called Bryce's Secret. Good God. So what ended up happening on May 7th, Jane Street unstaked and sold its entire position in a single day, all at the $1 peg. And that was hours before the stablecoin peg began to depeg and collapse. Afterwards, Jane Street shorted UST and Luna after learning about details of the confidential rescue effort, ultimately making more than $134 million across those trades. Then they tried to cover up their insider trading information by minimizing this kind of visibility and decommissioning wallets that were tied to the trades. this just really frustrates me because I put my entire tax savings for 2022 into Anchor to earn 20% yield on money that was just lying there dormant. I thought I was smarter than everyone and that there was no way that that Anchor could go down without me sniffing out real problems beforehand. And I essentially lost all of my tax savings for 2022 when Anchor collapsed, to the point where I was in debt to the IRS for many, many, many years after. It was... A lot of my friends also had money in Anchor, money that they were setting aside for very real things that they needed. Things like down payments on a house or living expenses. So even the best of us, quote unquote, the best of us, and at this point, I'd been in blockchain for 5 years. I should have known better. But the greed got the best of me. I lost everything that was necessary for actual day-to-day payments. I lost money I couldn't afford to lose. And it sucked for years after. But that's why this story is so intriguing to me, because there was obviously insider shenanigans going on, and now we have Terraform Labs stating that there was insider trading information against Jane Street. Just to reiterate what happened, Terraform collapsed in May of 2022 after Terra USD lost its peg to the dollar and sent Luna from above $60 to fractions of a cent within days. I know people who lost millions on this. Millions. I know people who lost everything. And honestly, I don't want to bring up any names, but after this, I think someone I know went crazy and legitimately lost their mind and has since been spiraling downward in negative mental health. Really, really sad stuff. The $40 billion Terra implosion unleashed a contagion that toppled just absolutely gargantuan firms. Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, Voyager, FTX, BlockFi went down as a result of this. Just so many people. Trillions of dollars were erased in market value. And this is why this story hits home. Because there were people who knew that this was coming and made millions of dollars off of it. People that were really closely related to the project and the teams. On to another piece of kind of scary news, and I'm only highlighting this to remind you to be safe out there, folks. The wife of Sandbox co-founder Sebastian Bourget, who has been a guest on the Smart Economy podcast, Sebastian, was targeted in a kidnapping attempt. Crazy. 6 thieves went to their house. One of them dressed up as a mail delivery man wearing the suit and everything. And once Sebastian's wife opened the door, all 6 of them tried to break into her house so they could steal her crypto. And I guess she screamed or made a big fuss, and neighbors were alerted by her cries, intervened, and forced the group to scatter. 4 of the suspects escaped in their vehicle, 2 escaped on foot, and the 2 that escaped on foot were caught, and the 4 others are still at large. Why is this a big deal? Well, this is yet another incident in France, nonetheless, where wrench attacks are on the rise. If people know you have a sufficient amount of crypto, you are a target. There's no other way to put it. You have to keep yourself safe and secure because people want to steal what is yours. And we're seeing, especially in France, that people are using weapons and kidnapping people and abducting them and forcing them at hostage to steal their crypto. According to the French police, 41 kidnappings or attempted abductions have been linked to cryptocurrencies since January 1 of this year in France alone. Since 2023, 135 incidents have taken place in France, which accounts for nearly 80% of all the cases in Europe. Guys, if you live in France and you have crypto, please be safe. Take care of yourself. get your crypto holdings out of your house and figure out a multi-sig solution where you can't be stolen from. It's really scary out there. And something that worries me more is I'm beginning to think you don't even need to actually have a ton of crypto. People just need to think you do. If someone came and tried to rob me, the juice would not be worth the squeeze. I've been in Neo for 8 years. That's the ecosystem I've been working in. You're not going to get much out of me, sadly. That's a topic for another day in another medium. We'll finish on one more sad piece of news, and then we got two more to wrap up. Two more good pieces of news to wrap up. Syndicate Labs is winding down its operations after 5 years, stating that there's no L2 demand. They're an infrastructure provider for Ethereum that focused on rollups and sequencers. Rollups is a type of L2, and sequencers are the infrastructure and architecture that relay information from the L2 to the L1 and vice versa. The team said, quote, "The rollup market has shrunk dramatically. For every new rollup spinning up, several more are quietly shutting down. The market has shifted away from our technology, making it impossible to wait out these market conditions." The team also went on to note that it is not the public L2 infrastructure that's winning in terms of TradFi adoption. It's the ones that are building specifically for this use case. The team went on to say, quote, "The ones that are thriving are highly custom with execution environments built completely from scratch. Our framework doesn't fall into either category. It's too specific to work as a generic primitive and not close enough to the execution client to be extended into specific apps," end quote. Like when we look at blockchain networks like Canton or the adoption of Providiums, we can kind of see the argument playing out. Canton is a TradFi-oriented based network built specifically for traditional financial institutions, built from scratch, made for this type of use case and end user. And then Providiums are a ZK-enabled tool on the ZK Sync chain that allow consortia to create sort of networks that obscure, obfuscate, hide, shield transactions on that chain. And the most recent kind of exposition of how Providiums were being adopted in March of this year, maybe April, a group of regional banks here in the US created a Providium-powered network that they're all using to intercommunicate with one another. So this is, once again, an execution environment built completely from scratch for the users that need it. And in both of these cases, they're TradFi and banking institutions and entities. So RIP to public architecture and infrastructure. Just another signal of where we're at in the market in terms of adoption. We're not seeing public service providers be able to survive and remain survivable. But that being said, let's move on to something positive. Securitize is one of these specific companies that is building specifically for their end users, TradFi. Long story short, Securitize makes it possible and super easy to tokenize traditional financial assets. They've posted record revenue, $3.4 billion in tokenized assets under management. They landed partnerships with the New York Stock Exchange this year, as well as with Uniswap. So not only are they collaborating with TradFi, but they're also integrating and embedding within DeFi. The Q1 revenue was $19.5 million, up 39% from a year earlier. And tokenized assets under management reached $3.4 billion as of March 31 this year. Though they have $25 billion in total assets under administration. Securitize said, quote, tokenization is evolving from isolated products into an interconnected financial system, end quote. And we're starting to see that. In March, Securitize and the New York Stock Exchange revealed a collaboration supporting the tokenized securities market. And they've also been called out to providing a picks and shovels play for tokenization, where in the world of capturing equities and New York Stock Exchange as a partner, you only need to capture a fraction of the activity, 1% or less, to be able to make a huge dent and to be able to earn revenue and to be able to earn a lot of funds. Just 1 basis point of the New York Stock Exchange's roughly $44 trillion market cap would more than double the tokenized asset base on Securitize. Additionally, they helped grow the reach of BlackRock's BUIDL fund through integrations with Uniswap Labs, and shares of BUIDL are now available to trade on the Uniswap X infrastructure. This is an example of how Securitize is melding and intercommunicating between TradFi and DeFi. Additionally, regulators in the US here are signaling their support for becoming more open to blockchain-based securities infrastructure. Just Monday of this week, maybe Tuesday, the SEC hinted, let us know that they're looking at innovation exemption frameworks for tokenized stocks. So I would expect to see this is the story of this year. How is TradFi and mainstream financial institutions integrating blockchain and adopting crypto? And this is just another feather in the cap for the story that continues to emerge. And you can hear my soliloquy, my soapbox rant about this at the beginning of this daily digital download episode today, where I spoke about this ad length for about 4 minutes or so. All right. Lastly, wrapping up, at least we finally have a crypto native entity that is doing good. Hyperliquid ETFs saw $25.5 million in net inflows as institutional money begins to pile in. This is showing strong demand for spot hype ETFs, which have brought in $54 million in cumulative net inflows over the past 7 trading days. $54 million in inflows since the hype ETF started trading 7 business days ago. Peter Chung, head of research at Presto Research, said institutions appear to be seizing the opportunity. Early data shows they're piling into hype ETFs faster than they did into Bitcoin ETFs on a market cap adjusted basis. Dominic John, analyst of Zeus Research, said that the inflows suggest an easy entry point into the infrastructure narrative, with investors also recognizing a transparent, usage-linked revenue story. Hyperliquid is probably the darling project of the 2026 bear market. It's a quote-unquote decentralized exchange that offers support for spot trading, perps trading, and access to non-crypto tokenized assets, things like oil and gold and silver, commodities. It's arguably the killer use case or the big winner for 2026. And folks are starting to see that. Hashkey Group, Tim Sun, their senior researcher, said that decentralized exchanges are beginning to be integrated into the broader restructuring of financial infrastructure. So, I mean, if you feel like you missed on the hype train, Matt Hogan from Bitwise says that it's just starting. Go do your own research, obviously. Nothing I ever say here is financial advice. But yeah, Hyperliquid is the asset. Hype, the asset, and Hyperliquid, the platform, is something that I think is a bit of a darling and is capturing attention from TradFi. Largely, I think TradFi traders like Hyperliquid because they can trade commodities on the weekend. Whereas if you want to trade wheat or gold or oil in traditional markets, particularly here in the US, you only get to operate Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, New York times. If you're waking up in California, that's 6 to 2 p.m., 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Gosh, you have an early day if you're a trader in California. Anyways, I'm going out of my way to focus on Hyperliquid this year and to start building my corpus for my agents to understand that Hyperliquid is kind of a big deal. And folks, with all that said, thank you so much for tuning into the Daily Digital Download today. If you haven't yet, head down to thesmarteconomist.beehive.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, where you get the finest of alpha built off of the concepts and the conversations that we were having this week on the Daily Digital Download. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in to these. I make these for you, and I make them for me as well, but here we are. Anyways,